Why is it so hard to choose? I can't ever seem to make a choice, and then every time I do, I'm plagued with the feeling that it's the wrong one. Should I watch Tammy and the T-Rex? Mac and Me? Other Stuart Raffle films? By the way, don't mind the couch looking like this. My wife spilled a huge thing of water on it, so I'm washing the cushions. It's no big deal. But, if you happen to know me and know her and have her phone number, you could text her something like, "Hey, heard about the big spill, hope everything's okay." Or, "I thought you might be going through a tough time, what with the spill and all. I'm just thinking about you." That'd be pretty funny. Honestly, I used to be a good decision maker, maybe even a great one. I constantly made choices of adventure. Of my own adventure. I choosed my own adventure. Choose Your Own Adventure was a series of books that started in 1979. That's right, kids. Your parents, long before you were born, paged through these books, had amazing adventures, and died terrible, terrible deaths. Most of us remember how this goes. You open the book, start reading, and then you get a choice. If you make one choice, you go to a certain page and the story continues there. If you make another choice, you go to a different page and the story continues from there. After making a series of choices, you either have a good ending, a so-so ending, a bad ending, or end up dead. Horrible, painful death is not as infrequent as you might expect. A lot of times you'd be reading this and you'd put a finger in each choice so that you could go back to the previous choice in case you made the wrong one. But eventually you'd run out of fingers and you would die and it would just all be over. According to Edward Packard, writer of the first and many subsequent Choose Your Own Adventure books, the idea for the books came from bedtime stories he told his daughters. "I had a character named Pete, and I usually had him encountering all of these different adventures on an isolated island. But one night, I was running out of things for Pete to do, so I just asked my daughters what they would do." Because kids are cruel and can never make anything easy, Packard's daughters came up with 2 different ideas for where the story should go next. And Packard went ahead and made up an ending for each of the different paths. What really struck me was the natural enthusiasm they had for the idea. And I thought, could I write this down? And thus an empire was born, and we got such titles as Your Codename is Jonah, which is always properly pronounced as The Codename's Jonah, Hyperspace, with the strangest side eye I've ever seen, and Who Killed Harlow Thrombey? A, ridiculous name. B, I have a pretty strong guess. Probably not Donny Osmond, probably not this lady using the most hardworking hairband in show business, maybe this guy, but I'm putting my money on the guy who looks like Gargamel except worse because he's literally green, seems to be grimacing, and is wearing a bow tie, which is always suspicious. Today we're looking at The Cave of Time, the first Choose Your Own Adventure book. I picked it up and gave it a go, and I died. And I died again. The basic plot of The Cave of Time is that you're a kid, you wander into a cave, and your first choice is to wander deeper into the cave or to not do that. That sounds unimportant and arbitrary, but we'll come back to it. Depending on the choices you make, you might end up flung into a utopic future where you'll be killed by a bug thingy, flung into the distant past where you'll be killed by a dinosaur, or flung into an ambiguous time where you will die for reasons like, for example, there being no oxygen on the planet. Even though I read a lot of these as a kid, I never made it through any of them with what I would call a good ending. Even the one about the track runner who might end up using PEDs, which I thought would be pretty easy, just don't do drugs, didn't work out as I planned. So this time, I decided to plot out the entire book and see, was it just me? Do I make bad choices? Are these super difficult to get through even as an adult? Is there a good ending to be had? What resulted in my analysis of The Cave of Time was a very confusing map with all the paths and endings that were available. Here are my top 3 endings, by the way. Top 3! First, probably rescuing everyone from the sinking of the Titanic, which is kind of posed as a mediocre ending because you don't actually make it back to your own time, but come on, that's a lot of people you saved. Plus, maybe we would have gotten another Jimmy Cameron Terminator movie if that tragedy was really reduced to just loss of property. Second, this ending where you meet a girl from 2022 who says the future is awesome and there's lots of nature trails and nobody drives cars anymore.
It didn't help that I read this at home. I live near a busy road that people use to announce to the world that they own a vehicle and have paid extra to make it sound like it's not working properly. But the best ending, hands down, was the one where I went back in time, met a guy who had tuberculosis, agreed to take him to the future so he could be cured, and then he stayed in my time and became a history teacher. That's some pretty bonkers stuff. I'm not sure how open I'd be to a history teacher who told me that he came from 100 years ago in the past and was cured of tuberculosis, all that so he could tell me that I'm not allowed to chew gum in class. I did make some discoveries with this book. Here's the map at its finish, and what I've done is circle all the endings in orange. There's a lot of them. And then I used jelly beans to mark the different ending types, jelly beans being the most scientific of candies. I put them into 4 groups: good ending, meh ending, bad ending, and death. Good endings are endings where I ended up back in my own time or seemed to be in a different time but was happier overall. For example, there was an ending where I was in the past, but I became a surfer boy on an island, and it was pretty unambiguous about me being happier than I'd ever been in my life. On the opposite end, death endings were endings where I died. I did also add 1 or 2 to this category because though I wasn't dead yet when the book ended, I don't think I would have survived long doing things like helping build the Great Wall of China. I've nearly been killed by Legos. Long story. A bad ending that wasn't a death ending was something like being imprisoned forever or being stuck in a cave or what have you. Maybe not imminent death, but not a joyful good time. And meh endings, probably the most interesting in a way, are the ones that I was sort of ambivalent about. For example, did I survive when I went back in time and became an apprentice printer? Sure. Did the book use the phrase, as happy as you could expect to be? Absolutely it did. Do I, as a person who considers himself as happy as he could expect to be given the circumstances, understand that this is different from a good ending? You betcha. Let me give you an example of the kind of unbad but not satisfying meh endings from a different medium. This is a game called The Melting Apartment. It's a cool, creepy mystery someone made to run on Game Boy, and it plays a bit like a choose-your-own-adventure. Near the very beginning of the game, you pull up in your car, and one of the first choices you make, you get this message that you're not really feeling it, and before you even get out of the car to explore the titular apartment and its solidity, you can elect to just peace out. Which, of course, I did, and here's what happens. That's right, you just drive off. End of game. You haven't even done anything yet. Now, I'm guessing most players of The Melting Apartment think, like me, that this is pretty funny, and I give the game designer loads of credit because doing something like that certainly wasn't without effort. They put in some work just so I could have a laugh. And maybe this is sort of like the part in the horror movie where people say, "Don't go in that melting apartment." The game designer decided to let you make that decision, maybe even giving you a sly look at what happens when characters in horror make rational decisions. They live, but it's pretty boring. Most players who select this option probably go back and try for another ending, a real ending. This driving off type ending, Choose Your Own Adventure has these, and while they're not horrendous, they're wildly unsatisfying. You'll never feel like you accomplished anything. So the meh endings are not good per se, but they're not bad either. They're just unsatisfying. Anyway, when I sorted things out, good endings got green jelly beans, meh got yellow, bad got red, and death got purple. You might wonder why I didn't use a licorice jelly bean to indicate death, and the answer is that I will not permit them in my home. And here's the breakdown. We had a total of 11 good endings, 12 meh endings, 3 bad endings, and 13 death endings. So right away, the endings that result in death make up the largest portion of ending types. However, if you combine bad endings and deaths, you get 16 endings, and if you combine meh endings and good endings, you get 23. So about a third more on the non-dead, non-horror side if meh can count as good. But probably the most accurate way to look at this is to combine non-good endings, putting meh endings with bad and death endings, and comparing that to good endings. Because really, when you think about it, a meh ending is not satisfying. It's not a good ending. That gives us 11 good endings, 28 non-good endings, meaning that you've got about a 1 in 3 chance of hitting a good ending. Not great odds. Here's where it gets really interesting though. Depending on the very first choice you make, you can go down a path that has a 1 in 3 chance of a bad/death ending, or you can go down a path that has about a 50-50 chance of you ending up either pretty unhappy or in a casket. This arbitrary first choice significantly decreases your odds of survival, and you haven't even really done anything yet. And this brings us to one of my major beefs with these books. Shouldn't the choices be more significant? Early on in the book, a few choices in, you're presented with a 50-50 coin toss choice with absolutely no information or way of deciding. It's literally a choice to take a left or a right path, knowing absolutely nothing other than there are 2 paths and you're going down one of them. If you go down the right passage, you're trapped. There are 4 possible endings, none good, and 1 where you'll be dead. If you go down the left passage, you've got 7 possible endings, 3 of them good, 1 meh, and 3 deadly. This incredibly arbitrary coin flip of a choice changes your odds drastically and eliminates your odds of getting a good ending at all. Now maybe this is what Edward Packard meant to do. Maybe this is, reflective of real life. I suppose we all make choices every day that send us down a path that we never really intended. I can tell you my wife certainly didn't intend to spill a whole water bottle on the couch, but here we are, laundry a-tumbling. But I don't know, for me, that's not satisfying. It's supposed to be realistic perhaps, but wouldn't it be better if it was less realistic and more like, a game? In 2011, Jane McGonigal released a book called Reality is Broken. It was a book about gaming, and the basic question it asked is why we like games. What is it about Farmville that had everyone farming that didn't translate into real-life farming? McGonigal's answer is simple. Games are designed to please us, and reality isn't. Therefore, reality is broken. If we apply that to Cave of Time, I'd have to unfortunately call the book broken, because the chances of getting an unsatisfying end, the result of choices I didn't understand and couldn't figure out, is pretty realistic, and therefore it's broken. It's not a game, it's reality. In an interview, Packard said, "My intent was to try and make choose-your-own adventures like life as much as possible with regard to the consequences of your choices. In life, usually, if you make a wise decision, you do better than if you make a dumb decision. I didn't want it to be a lottery, but I didn't want it to be didactic either, so that if you always did the right and smart thing, you always succeed. I tried to balance it that way." I don't know that Packard totally succeeded, certainly not in his first choose-your-own adventure outing. It felt pretty random to me. I mean, how does wisdom play into a decision like left cave or right cave? I tried getting through one of these by flipping a coin for every choice and I died. I tried to do what I thought was morally best and I died. I tried the Costanza method, making every choice the opposite of what my instincts say, and I died. However, Packard did break reality in places and gamify the books here and there. In the book Inside UFO 5440, the introduction talks about a place, a paradise called Ultima, and in the opening pages of the book, it tells you, "Sometimes, for the most wonderful places, there can be no way to get there." What Packard meant by that is that it was impossible to make choices that organically led to Ultima. You had to cheat, basically, to get the best ending available in the book, nay, the entire series. Anyway, I'm not saying these books have to be wholesome or promote family values or something. I would just like some logical consistency. Maybe what Choose Your Own Adventure is trying to say is that the world is random. It's chaos. How could you possibly know that stacking your coffee cup in a weird way in a busing tray will cause the person working at the coffee shop to drop the entire tray of dishes, lose their job, and then go home and write the next great American novel? I think the thing is, Choose Your Own Adventure tries to contain the madness that is real life within these slim pages, and it's more than my brain can handle. I think it's a matter of survival that we don't necessarily know that every move we make has cascading results that make people happy and miserable, and I guess, if there's a Bigfoot or ant people or an evil power master, sometimes dead. Maybe the takeaway that I want to promote here is this. You can't know which choices will result in you crashing a glider into the side of a Zeppelin, so you might as well make humane, kind, well-informed choices up to the point that you find yourself in that very unlikely position. You don't know what'll happen exactly when you cut someone off in traffic because you're just kind of in a mood today, but if things are pretty random, why enter more negatives into the equation? Maybe it's like this. You can't control the world around you, you can't control all the outcomes, but you can control when faced with a choice which path you take. So making the choices that help people or make someone's day nicer are probably the right choices. You might still end up a prisoner of the ant people, but at least you'll be able to hold your head up high and say that when you were in control, when you did have a choice, you acted like a human being, not an ant person. They seem pretty lousy. Maybe if you can possibly help it, you shouldn't spill water all over the couch. And if your wife does spill water all over the couch, you probably should choose to not give her too much of a hard time about it. Unless it's good for content. In that case, there really is no choice. Overall, the choices we all made in Choose Your Own Adventure books don't really matter so much. It's really more that Edward Packard created a new kind of thing, a different way to think about books and reading. They didn't have to be as predetermined as a normal book. Page 1 didn't have to lead to page 2. You and a buddy could read the same book and have completely different experiences. And for all their flaws, most people remember these books pretty fondly. Probably because they were at least a little bit more like playing Nintendo than a typical novel was. Or maybe you're all just a bunch of weird sickos who liked horrific deaths. Seriously, like this one from Choose Your Own Adventure 17, The Race Forever. Your car explodes within seconds after you crash into the elephant, and the noise and fire stampede the whole herd nearby. The stampeding elephants cause a panic among wildlife who join the great rush to escape the flames. At least some of the animals in the area will survive the grassland fire your burning wreck has started. The end. Whatever the case, it's good when someone can put a spin on books. Make something new or different that showcases what books can do and Black Mirror can only make a bad attempt at. Seriously, who's sitting through those same sequences over and over just to get another meh ending? Maybe you guys should hire the melting apartment person. That dude gets it.